These people do not want this information getting leaked. And he was out there just like sharing everything. Most people would probably not talk about that in public.
He had 5,000 subscribers, signed up to a newsletter that had yet to be published.
She is just on another level with that.
Man, I don't hear anybody talking about this or doing this.
So at this point, I've written around 70 deep dives, and at 2,000 to 4,000 words each, that's a lot of content. Each one has 4 to sometimes 6 plus different growth levers that these people have used to grow their email list. So we thought it would be fun to walk through some of the wildest growth tactics that I discovered in my research and share those with you today.
And Chenell, how many hours do you think you spent total doing these deep dives?
Yeah, I mean, each one takes about 20 hours. Some of them, like Sahil Bloom, took about 40 to 50 hours. So quite a bit.
Quite a bit. That's probably in the thousands of hours if I don't do public math, but if my math checks out.
I think it's about like 1,700 hours or so of just research.
Wow.
Yeah. Lots of podcasts.
No kidding. All right, let's dive into these growth tactics. I'm really excited to check these out.
Yeah, me too. So this first one comes from Cody Sanchez of contrarianthinking.co is actually where the newsletter lives. At the time I wrote that deep dive in February of 2023, she had over 250,000 subscribers, and she'd grown that in just 3 years, which by itself is insane. But at this point, I have to guess she's pushing 1 million subscribers. She has a massive YouTube channel, and she's just grown even more. But one of the things I found she did in the early days was something I actually didn't even share in the deep dive, but I think about this one a lot because it's just so on brand for her. So Cody Sanchez, she does Main Street businesses. So she'll buy businesses and grow them instead of starting businesses from scratch, which is super smart. But this is so on brand for her because she actually bought newsletters to grow her subscriber base in the early days. Now, most people, when you buy a newsletter, you transfer the list into your account and call it a day, right? You might send an email or two and say, hey, my name's Cody. I'm taking over this email list. Hope you enjoy it, right? Kind of not the best way to do it. But instead, Cody, she bought the newsletter, positioned hers like Contrarian Thinking in there as a sponsor or as a guest writer. She would write guest posts. So she would do that and not tell anybody that she actually bought the newsletter. So she would almost like, for lack of a better word, siphon these people all over to Contrarian Thinking. And at the same time, she'd continue to grow that newsletter. And then once she felt like she got the subscribers she was going to get from it, she ended up selling the newsletter back to someone else. So she bought it for, let's say, $1,000, grew the thing, and then sold it back for more money, but also was able to take subscribers with her.
And so she grew the whole thing under the guise of it still being, XYZ newsletter, not Contrarian Thinking.
Correct. Yes.
And then she'd sell it back to the person or to somebody else with that same name.
Yeah.
And just had totally increased the value, kind of like you do with a business, right?
Yes, exactly. She said, this was one of the quotes that I took from that. She said,
it's just like a private equity play. You get into the business, you optimize it, grow the subscribers. Then I transition those subscribers over to Contrarian Thinking. Hopefully the newsletter is still growing at that time. Turn around and sell it to somebody else.
And I was like, wow, she is just on another level with that.
That's amazing. And that's not surprising to me, in a lot of ways, given like her background with, buying businesses, like really high cash flowing businesses and reselling them and all that sort of stuff. So very impressive. But she's, I think, the only person I've seen publicly at least admit to do it using this strategy.
Yes, for sure. Most people would probably not talk about that in public.
And I think that probably actually has helped her with growth just by like sharing those kind of intimate behind the scenes details too.
Do you have one you wanted to share?
One of the more interesting deep dives, I think, a lot of them are interesting, but one of them maybe more unique is a better word. Deep dives that I think you've done is with Yossi Levi, the car dealership guy. And I think it's unique in a few ways. One being that this guy, Yossi, built this car dealership guy anonymously, or anonymous account essentially, to over 450,000 followers, I believe, before actually, revealing himself. And I just thought, one, that's like, he's not the first person to do that, of course, but there's not a lot of content creators who are really doing this anonymous play. And part of the reason why he did it was because he was, and why it worked too, is because he was giving out all this insider info on a really specific industry that the general public knows about, but doesn't know about the inside workings of it. So he talked about car dealerships, the auto industry, and he gave out a lot of, like I said, insider info that he could do because he was anonymous, and therefore could kind of do it without getting his hand slapped too much. So he was an auto dealer, so he had all those inside numbers around this, correct me if I'm wrong, Chenell, was he an auto dealer, or did he work for one?
No, I think his dad might have owned one, and he worked in the family
Right.
business. And so he had all of those insider numbers. And I remember thinking, like, because I'm from the Northeast, like, and I was born, like, grew up in New Jersey.
Right.
I kept thinking, like, this is like the dealer mafia. Like, these people do not want this information getting leaked. And he was out there just like sharing everything. Like, he would talk about if they thought a business was going to drop, like the stock was going to drop, or like they were going to just slash prices, or interest rates were dropping. It was just fascinating to hear all of these things. And I know that he really angered a lot of dealers around the space.
No kidding. And then so it was pretty risky when he finally did expose, his actual name and face and everything, right?
And he did it in an interesting way. He put together this like documentary almost of like his whole story. It was very well done.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe we should, we'll probably link that up down in the show notes, I would imagine too, because that could be cool to see.
Yeah, for sure.
I think one of the other reasons that I just touch on the story, the anonymity was very interesting, and the information that he was sharing was great too. But one thing that you highlighted in the deep dive is his ABC content strategy. So he was like very basically prolific with his posting, like every day, twice a day. And he had certain like types of posts he would do every day. You need to have a combination of what you dubbed like insanely valuable content, which was all that insider info for the car dealership. But you also need to like post it on a regular basis and post kind of the right type of content that people would both like and engage with. So I think he did that really well. And obviously it worked to the tune of, over 450,000 followers. And I think he's got 65,000 newsletter subscribers as well. So he's doing pretty okay.
Yeah, he's doing well.
Yeah.
One of the other ones that I wanted to bring up was actually probably one of the most underrated deep dives. I don't think it got a ton of attention. It was something I published early on, so maybe that's why. But Ali from First 1000, he actually writes about growth strategies of startups. And he was just so intentional about his growth. Like he started at 0 and he was like, I'm going to hit 1,000 in 6 months. And he was like, okay, so let me back into this. I need to get 6 subscribers a day. And he just did everything he could to hit that 6 number a day. And it's like smaller numbers, but I think the intentionality behind it was so key. I found 39 plus tactics he tried, and he actually detailed them in his own posts on the newsletter. So I just went through them and I was like, this is fascinating. And so the thing that worked best for him in the early days was a product hunt launch, but I think he had 3 product hunt launches before it hit. Like the first one completely flopped. He put no time into it to figure out how to properly launch there. Then he did another like smaller launch for a semi-related product. But then the third time I think he got like over 4,500 subscribers from that product hunt launch. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. So, just like constantly hammering at that 6 subscriber goal per day was really interesting. And the fact that he not only tried all this stuff, but had the wherewithal to keep track of all the analytics and the numbers of what worked and what didn't. I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, I really like how he broke that down, basically taking that big number of 1,000, which feels daunting, especially when you have 0, and being like, well, if I just do 6 a day, that feels way more doable, way more achievable than, going from 0 to 1,000 in 6 months. So I think that's what more people should kind of aim towards, especially even if you have a bigger number, like 10,000 a day. Well, what does that look like? Can you get 60 people a day kind of thing?
Yeah.
And so breaking it down that way is really interesting. And the fact that I believe he called his newsletter the First 1000.
I was just going to say that. It just literally hit me right now that he was aiming for 1,000 and he called his newsletter the First 1,000.
Yeah. And then he built the whole newsletter model on that, right? He talked about getting first 1,000 newsletters and then I think first 1,000 users for products and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think the whole impetus behind it was getting your first 1,000 users, but he totally transitioned that into getting your first 1,000 newsletter users, if you will. So we're talking a lot about growth and getting more people to check out your work. But do you know what one of the best ways to turn those people into email subscribers and even paying customers is? Social proof. I'm talking about testimonials from readers and people on social media just mentioning how much they love your work. And today's sponsor, Senja, is my favorite tool for collecting these kinds of testimonials. And not just collecting them, but they also make it super easy to showcase them on your website and share them on social media. You can even embed them in your emails. It adds so much more credibility to see someone other than yourself raving about your work. Senja is a tool I've personally been using for the past 18 months, so it's super exciting to have them support this new show. You can get started completely free at growthinreverse.com/Senja. That's growthinreverse.com/SENJA. And you can start using the tool right now to collect all of those nice things people are saying about your work. And when you're ready to upgrade, you can use the code REVERSE to get your first month for just $1. Thanks again to Senja for sponsoring the podcast. And now back to the show.
Okay, so one of your more recent deep dives was with Tom Alder. So Tom Alder writes strategy breakdowns, newsletter. He is very prolific and on LinkedIn. He's trying to be more prolific on Twitter as well. And but it all started, to me, the interesting thing was this all started back about 3 years ago in 2021 when he was still working. I believe he was working at Atlassian at the time. Atlassian is a company, huge company for those of you who don't know, who bought Trello and bought Loom and have just a suite of tech SaaS products, right? And so Tom was working on their product strategy team. And so he kind of knew how things worked and how to, get products in front of people and get people to use them. And so he started creating content sort of on that topic. And breaking down, business strategies and that sort of thing too. And so he started with a 30-day challenge on LinkedIn. I'm just going to post, one post a day, which again, going back to that Ali Abaleta thing where it's just like, instead of thinking like I have to do 30 posts, it's just like, no, just do one a day. It's a little bit more, it's a smaller piece to chew off than obviously a ton. So he did that. Just a year ago, he started basically promoting his yet to be released newsletter. And before he had launched his newsletter, eventually, Strategy Breakdowns, he had 5,000 subscribers signed up to a newsletter that had yet to be published. So it just shows the power of, everybody hears about consistency, but it's like the power of consistency with also like, doubling down on your niche, like with this business strategy and breaking them down and posting about that, and then building up this audience that's really interested in that topic. And then I'm going to be sharing this all in a newsletter format. Subscribe. And Tom did way more than just, I'm simplifying it here. He did way more than that, but I really think the way he went about it was so smart and super impressive. I mean, I have like 5,000 subscribers to my newsletter and I've been at it for like 3 years, and he had that before he even published. So it was a really cool story, to read about. And he's very analytical and tactical with the way he does things. So, definitely a deep dive to check out, especially if you're really into posting on LinkedIn and trying to grow an audience there.
Yeah. And this is something I recommend. I actually had a friend recently who has like 300,000 plus followers on LinkedIn, but no newsletter. And I was like, okay, we got to change that. And I told him, I was like, just follow the Tom Alder playbook, because if you have an audience that size and you don't have a newsletter yet, you can simply set up a landing page with just an easy opt-in form. You don't even have to start writing the newsletter. Just start a wait list, start telling people what's coming and hype this thing up, because a launch is I think Jay Klaus talks about this a lot. He says a launch is the one moment where you have so much, people are so excited for you. They're going to share it and do all the things.
Yeah.
Once you launch, that excitement kind of dies down a little bit. So if you can capitalize on that ahead of time, and when you have a large audience like that, it just makes so much sense.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he executed that to a T. And now he's got, I think he has over 100,000 LinkedIn followers. He's got 55,000 plus subscribers for Strategy Breakdowns. And again, I believe he only launched Strategy Breakdowns within about the last year or so, just over a year, maybe summer of 2023, if I'm not mistaken. So he's done it all very strategically. And 80% of that growth has all been organic too. I think he's done some paid growth as well, which was 21% or so of his growth that you laid out in your deep dive. But to get to 55,000 subs, basically on the back of organic content, is pretty impressive.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
The next one I wanted to talk about, this was the one that I found the most compelling, but I wasn't sure how it was going to be received when I published it. And this was about TLDR. That's the name of the newsletter. It's written by a guy named Dan Nye. The title of this deep dive ended up being The Multimillion-Dollar Newsletter Run by One Guy. And so it was super compelling because who doesn't want that, right? But he spends like 30 minutes a day creating content, like just 30 minutes a day with the content. And at the time I wrote that, I think it was in like January of 2023, his rate cards, like his sponsorship slot for that primary ad spot was 15 grand. And this is a daily newsletter. So it's just like, what? Now, he started it in the middle of 2018, I believe it was.
Okay.
But he just grew it with he just optimized everything. He optimized every part of the newsletter. He made sure the page loaded like instantly. He also went as far as making sure that as soon as that page loaded, your cursor was in the subscribe box. So you didn't even have to click. You just typed your email and hit enter and you were subscribed.
Wow.
Like those are the kinds of optimizations he was making. And I'm like, I nerd out about this stuff. So I thought this was super funny. He even tested out like letting you subscribe with this thing called OAuth, which means you can, I'm sure you've seen this on a site before where you can sign up with like your Gmail account. So you don't even have to enter your email. So he tried that for a while. He doesn't do that anymore. So I have to wonder if that wasn't converting the way he wanted to. He earns millions from this newsletter. And at this point, I looked this morning, there are 10 other newsletters. So this was tldr.tech. So it was all about tech and that kind of thing. He now has one for like AI, crypto, IT,
Right.
and then they have like 6 other ones coming. So they're just essentially taking the same model and showcasing it across different industries. And I was like, oh, so fascinating. He could probably sell that thing for lots of millions.
Lots of millions. Yes. Well, I mean, you just look at like the Milk Road and the Hustle, who sold for 10-ish to $30-ish million, and that was just one newsletter each. I mean, there's obviously some value in those, but yeah, if he's got, he's kind of doing like the morning brew strategy, right? Like, they had marketing brew and tech brew and like all these different sort of verticals with the same style. So it's kind of like franchising out almost this newsletter model to just different verticals and industries and growing them and then creating this like cash flowing asset that you can then sell off. So it's very smart.
Yes. Very, very smart.
That's awesome.
And I think about it often. At that point, I was like, should I start a daily newsletter? Like, can I just like follow his path?
And you decided not to.
I decided not to. And now I'm looking at this 10 newsletter thing and I'm like, oh man, where did I go wrong?
Is he still, is Dan still he can't be a one person team anymore?
I doubt it. I'm sure he has some people helping him, at least with sponsorship sales or something. We got to get him on here.
I think so. Pick his brain a little bit more. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I got one more if we got time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so I've read this deep dive before and I totally missed this. I think it's one of the potentially, underrated or unknown organic growth strategies I think that you've written about. And that's with Alex Garcia, what he did. I don't know if he still does it. So maybe it's not that underrated because maybe it didn't work great after he tried it. But what he published about it was this, what you called the highly unit cross promotion strategy. So everybody's familiar with newsletter to newsletter cross promotions. But Alex decided, well, let's do something a little bit different. And I'm going to find people who have like captive audiences on places like TikTok and YouTube and anywhere there's like video content. And so one of the people he reached out to, I assume probably a friend of his, Pat Walls from Starter Story, who you've also written about. He reached out to these people and was basically like, I'll do a newsletter to video swap. So you promote me or my newsletter marketing examined in your video, and I will promote your channel, you or your channel or a video, whatever it might be, in my newsletter.
Alex Garcia, a kid from Austin, Texas, who makes $800,000 a year writing 5 different email newsletters.
And so he did this with Pat Walls, and he wrote about it, and that swap got him, he wrote between 5 and 10,000 subscribers. So it doesn't look like he necessarily tracked it super closely, but he probably saw a bump in subscribers after his video cross promotion went live on Pat's page. But still, I thought, they got my wheels turning. I was like, man, I don't hear anybody talking about this or doing this. Basically having like a video ad or partnering up with somebody who has a decent size, captive audience on video and promoting a newsletter that way. So I just thought that was like, wow, nobody talks about this. I wonder if it's like something that should be done more, or maybe it's just too much work. I don't know. But I think even the amount of work that it might take, if you find the right partner, it could have like huge reward. So it could be worth that little extra effort, especially if you don't have like a huge budget to spend on like paid growth and you want to, expedite your growth relatively quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And he's really big into like the short content game, like the short video content. I know he has a course or a class called Cut 30. But I'm wondering if he's done this like recently. I was trying to pull it up, but I don't think he has, but which is kind of fascinating. I feel like there's an opportunity here for him to do this with short form content too.
Totally.
And just kind of do it that way. But I mean, he's got all kinds of growth stuff on the back end. His sponsorship strategy is really fascinating. We can get into that in another episode, but definitely a very, very smart operator.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be one of those things where he's like, well, he's got 200,000 subscribers as it is, and maybe he doesn't necessarily need that to go through all that work to get that growth now anymore. But I know in the beginning that probably really helped surge growth for him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I have one more. This was probably one of the more popular deep dives I wrote. Of course, Justin Welsh, super smart guy also.
The GOAT.
Right? I was fascinated by this story because this one growth lever it almost seems like not a growth lever, but if you think about it, it is definitely one. His system on the back end is fascinating. And I remember watching this YouTube video where Dickie Bush and Nicholas Cole actually interviewed him. You could tell like they were 20 minutes in and they were like, this is an okay interview. But then Justin did something that made their eyes light up and ended up launching a $2 million product. Wild. Justin was like,
and I think that most people assume that I wake up in the morning and like think of what to write and then write it and publish it and like it just goes viral. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Like this is a job and I treat it like one. And so I have systems, just like I had systems when I was leading sales teams, that allows me to create content. Would you be opposed to me sharing my screen would that be all right?
Let's do it. I think people would love it. Here, let me
make me the co-host. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, no,
Thanks.
let's get tactical.
and he shows his Notion screen and it's just like all of these templates and different ways and angles you can take on one single piece of content, like the contrarian post, the X versus Y. And so he has one idea and he can essentially collate that into like 10 different types of posts. And you can see Nicholas and Dickie were just like, minds blown. It was wild.
It was literally like that meme of that guy going,
yes,
absolutely, like
100%.
Yeah, it was awesome, the reaction.
Yeah. And so he showed that whole process. And I mean, that's the process he used to let him write daily on LinkedIn for like 4+ years. But he took that. He was like, wait a second. A lot of people really enjoyed that part of the video. So he turned around, he created this course called the Content OS, which has now had at least 11,000 students, probably more if I'm guessing right. I think he's probably made at least $1.5 to $2 million just from that one course alone. This wasn't on his radar to create this course. He got the idea from that YouTube interview he did with them. And I was just like, that is so cool. Like, way to capitalize on that, Justin.
Oh, absolutely. I think probably just the reaction there from guys who know what they're doing when it comes to writing online and creating content, like, Dickie and Cole, he was probably like, oh, I definitely need to, there's an opportunity here I can take advantage of if I'm blowing their minds, like, and these guys know what they're talking about, know what they're doing and have been in this for a while, then I'm sure I can help out a lot of people. So I think it's also goes back to that, I'm not sure who coined the term, but I've heard Jake Klaus talk about it, like basically like selling your sawdust. Maybe it was Justin Welsh, but essentially he's like taking your processes, things that help you do things more systematically and essentially like selling those processes. So that's really what he did here. He took his like process for creating really popular content that performs well, and he's like, I turned it into a template and sold it, and $1 million later, here we are. So it was brilliant. It was brilliant.
Well, this was fun. I enjoyed doing this. We'll have to do this more. Pick out some good growth levers and talk through them.
Absolutely. I think there's a few here on the list that we have that are really interesting. A few more recent ones too. We'll tease them now. We're not going to say what they are, but you'll have to listen to an upcoming episode where we dive into those ones a little bit more. So yeah, I think we could go on for hours about this stuff, but we'll save that for another episode for sure.
So I actually went ahead and created a page with all these deep dives. So if you're interested in learning more about what we just talked about, you can go to growthinreverse.com/wild, WILD, and check out these ones that we just mentioned. Other than that, you can find me just at growthinreverse.com or on Twitter and LinkedIn at Chenell CO. Where can they find you at, Dylan?
If you're interested in what I'm writing about as well, you can go to growthcurrency.net, subscribe to your newsletter there, or check out some of my articles on newsletter growth monetization. And then you can also follow me on basically all the socials at Growth Currency and just my full name on LinkedIn.
Awesome. This was fun.
This was a lot of fun. Can't wait to do the next one.